is it that the world pushes Israel to release killers, murderers, thugs, people who kill innocent civilians, including women and children, blow them up, celebrate death, and the idea that somehow releasing these people will actually bring a greater respect from Israel's enemies and therefore provide peace? Aaron?
Well, Crane, I really think this is, for me, the release of these prisoners. 104 will be the total number released in the next little while. But to me, it's a moral issue. And if there is no justice for acts of barbarism, then we are endorsing, even celebrating, acts of barbarianism. And, this week, these terrorists, when they came back into Palestinian territory, they received a hero's welcome. And so it was our government that demanded the release of these prisoners, and it is as if we've released 104 Timothy McVeighs, and we're calling evil good and good evil. And I think, Crane, under this philosophy, Timothy McVeigh would be celebrated rather than executed for his crime. And so we as a nation have forced Israel's hand in this matter, and I believe it's a moral issue. I think we've completed this week a very deep moral injustice, not only for Jerusalem and its population, but for the world. It's almost as if our nation is proclaiming these acts of terrorism, rather than be punished, they should be celebrated.
Interestingly enough, one of the focuses, and as you just said, our nation, our Secretary of State has been pushing Israel to do this, but one thing we did not expect is someone like Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to go along with this. Here are some statements from earlier today as they were talking about the 14th time they've met and are going to be moving forward with talks and negotiations. Here's just a snippet. Roll it.
I will never compromise on the security of Israel and its citizens and on the vital interests that protect our future. I think you know, John, more than most, how important it is to ensure the security of Israel. And I hope that despite the shifting sands in the Middle East, together we can build a rock-solid foundation for security and for a secure peace.
I think it's safe to say that we know what the issues are. We know the parameters and the possibilities of peace. And as I said not so many months ago at Ben Gurion Airport as I left, the time is soon arriving where leaders are going to have to make difficult decisions. We are close to that time, if not at it. And I think we understand the circumstances within which we are working. I know, I come here with no illusions. I know that there are many who are skeptical of whether or not the two parties can achieve peace. But I will tell you that I have personally learned something about the power of reconciliation.
Aaron, how does calling evil good work toward true reconciliation and peace?
It doesn't. And I think what's happened here, Crane, is we have endorsed terrorism, and we have turned a blind eye to these acts, and we've basically said to the president of the Palestinian people, Abbas, himself a terrorist, that terrorism works. Terrorism will be celebrated. And I read an article today about one of these men that was released. His name was Adnan Effendi, and he went into a Jerusalem marketplace, and unprovoked, he brutally stabbed two teenagers. This was an act of barbarianism. It was animalistic behavior, just went wild in a marketplace, and a mob surrounds this assailant to try to protect others. And here's the moral compass of the Jewish people. A Jewish mother of 8, her name is Bella Fruh, She used her own body to shield this killer for 27 minutes until the police arrived so that he would face justice. And today, Mrs. Fruh, as this man was released, this barbaric man was released today, and his acts were celebrated rather than brought to justice. Here's what she said: "I delivered the terrorist to justice, and justice gave me a slap in the face today." So really, Crane, I don't think this accomplishes anything except to endorse acts of terrorism.
What does Scripture say about justice? And if there's a way, if I'm to put the lens of Scripture before anything, the lens of God before anything, see Him first, what is justice in those eyes?
Well, when it comes to acts like this,
Yes.
the Scripture calls an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, that there has to be justice for acts of murder, unprovoked attacks towards others. And so our entire judicial system is based on Jewish law and Jewish principle, issues of morality within a civilization. And that's what has kept America, this civilization we call the Western world, it has kept us sane. It's kept us continuing to support justice and those types of issues within our culture. But here, we as a nation, we come from this Jewish moral compass, and we force the Israeli people to unleash these terrorists and unlock them from prison, from their prison of justice, and give them freedom. And so, for my mind, I can't understand why we would do such a thing.
Now, a few things jumped out at me there. One, obviously, we're talking about the foundation of our culture. Jewish, Judeo-Christian, it's been cited as in the United States as we're talking about the law. But a few things with the law. If we look at the law and an eye for an eye, did Christ bring us out of that law? And the other part to that is, does the law stand, but we also are commanded to forgive? And is there a great misunderstanding within both the Jewish and Christian community when it comes to that idea?
Well, if someone committed an act of violence towards someone in my community, personally, in my heart, I'm called as a believer to forgive that person. And as many Christians forgave Timothy McVeigh.
Yes.
But he is called, based on our judicial system, he's called to answer for his crimes. And in that case, it was an execution. And so the believer should forgive, those that commit crimes like this, but there has to be a justice system. And the folks that commit these crimes need to serve out their terms of justice.
What does that do? And a couple of things just to interject here and then ask. One, completely agree with you. But I want to process this because there's also in my flesh, I want to take these people out myself. I think everybody does when we hear this. I mean, that's our flesh, okay? But we want to do it out of vengeance. And we want to end these people who do these heinous acts. Make no mistake. But not out of vengeance. You see, we can't act out of vengeance, and that's what you're getting at. You're getting to justice. And the consequence for the taking of the lives is actually, and again, me translating, disciple in progress, doing the best I can with my shaped head, okay? Not the sharpest tool in the shed. So you got to help me here. But bottom line, as I look at this, I think this justice is about also putting a value. It puts a value on the lives that are taken. There is a consequence for these heinous acts. It's not out of vengeance. No, it is about justice, honoring those that are dead and putting a price on those lives and for taking those lives. Would that be a possible, and if possible, a consistent interpretation with what you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well said, Crane. Well said. And one of my favorite men in world history is a man named Simon Wiesenthal, a Jewish man that was a Holocaust survivor, survived the Nazi death camps, and through a series of events was able to put a list together of the torturers in that particular camp, and went on to spend his life. He founded the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles, and he was the Nazi hunter, and he hunted down the Nazi killers. He was the one that found Adolf Eichmann in Argentina, and it was not out of vengeance or anger or spite or wanting to kill these people that killed so many Jews. But Simon said, if there is no justice for this Holocaust, and if we do not bring these men to justice for their barbaric acts, then another Holocaust will happen. And so he was serving the people that had perished, their memory, but he was also serving the rest of humanity so that another Hitler could not come on the scene and commit these acts of violence and murder. And so exactly what you just said is correct. We do it out of the memory of those that have perished in Israel from these acts of violence, but also to prevent this from happening again. And our government this week, Crane, we've basically opened the door wide open for acts of terrorism to continue because we've made a clear statement there is no justice for acts of terrorism.
The enemy that we are dealing with, and it's a shared enemy with our number one ally, I would argue, in the world, and certainly in that region, would be Israel, is Islamic terrorists, be they Shia, Sunni, Islamists, Khomeinists, Salafists, however you want to characterize them. How do they view this type of decision, and what does it send to the people that are possibly out there who are nominal Muslims, who are not necessarily sitting there going, yay, I want to kill Jews and Christians, and are fully on board with what Islam and the doctrine says in regard to that, and the terrorist organizations and leaders? What does it do? What message does it send to them as well? Go ahead.
I really believe the underlying message that was sent through this prisoner release is that Israel no longer holds the moral high ground in this conflict, and that America slapped Israel's hands for even placing these terrorists in prison, and now we're going to force their hand to release them from prison. It's almost as if we're saying that both sides are equally moral, and that these terrorists were unjustly placed in prison for their acts of violence. So I believe what happened today across the Muslim world, they're basically celebrating, saying, finally, America is seeing that our acts of violence are justified.
Do they view the United States as strong or weak in the sense of the strong horse, weak horse? And by that account, when Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has signed off on this, how is he viewed? Aaron?
It weakens his position as a leader. It obviously weakens America that we're negotiating with terrorists, and we're giving them a bye, turning a blind eye to their acts. And so it really weakens the entire Western world against acts of violence.
So bottom line, we've endorsed our enemy's tactics, and in doing that, we have said that what we possess is the moral high ground, we being the United States, Israel, the West in general, and with our respect for life and our understanding and our culture being the foundation of our culture, Judeo-Christian culture. And we said, no, we're pretty much on the same level as a culture that's based on Islam. And the tactics that are used to advance the cause for both sides are equal. Yes?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, we've made terrorism as moral as the Jewish state.
On the flip side, we will ask Aaron about the 2014 predictions biblically. What's ahead for us as we look into Scripture in 2014? How are things lining up? That and much more. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, proudly on, say it with me now, AFR Talk.